All right, big money. Big money. Come on, guys. Give us some money. Big money. Why are you being such a weak spin?
I'm worried about it.
Oh, office supply. Post-it notes, all right, thanks. Ruby, your turn. All right, now let's spin it like a now. Yeah. Mini stapler.
Stapler.
It's right here, buddy. Oh. I know there are gift cards and stuff in here too. $100 gift cards. So, anyway, we're doing it for this month as well. So if you have Amy, I think you're gonna send out a call just so you can spin it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so what? Yeah. So send it in. We'll do a drawing. We'll do this again next week for this last 2 weeks. So, okay. Thanks.
You already saw that. I know.
Stephanie will stand in front of us.
Yeah, who's a winner then? We'll stand in front of it. Come on.
We're all
For
winners.
social media, please come stand by the wheel.
She's gone.
I'll stand by the wheel. Stand by the
No,
wheel.
she's
My
can't
prize.
take it. It's terrible.
Oh, who else? You won. Brandon.
Jason, you totally went. You understand.
Oh, Brandon.
I gotta
Brandon.
take a
Brandon,
picture
if
for
you're
Carl.
coming, stand by the wheel with your prize.
How's your Carl mask?
I'm sorry, guys. Just come on. Hurry up. Let's get
I've
that.
got candy in my mouth. Oh. What's your prize? Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Thanks, Julia, for it. Thank you very much. Woo!
Perfect. Thank you, relocation. Do we have any Vanguard or Marky? Did you prepare something?
I know, so go ahead.
Okay.
She's always prepared. That if you have a investor, there's a lot of rates. So don't leave that out when you're asking, are you looking, do you know anyone looking to buy or sell? It's also not investing, because there's a lot of investment still. And when you do, make sure you let your title officer know this is an investment property. A little different things, so a
Yep.
little more things we have. So
More communication, the better, so everybody knows what's going on. Be great. Okay. See why you guys got anything?
We just have to be here. We so appreciate you guys. And the relationship with you guys.
We appreciate you guys as well. All right. Madam Chair, Sam.
Alright, so I was asked to come play Stump the Attorney, but attorneys don't like to play that game. It's a little secret. We like to control the information. So I replied and said, how about not Stump the Attorney? Let's talk about some hot topics. So we're going to talk about selling in HOAs. That's always seems to be a sore spot. I know some people are here just because I said I don't. We're going to talk about seller's disclosures, which for some weird reason, in my job, things come and go in waves, right? One day I'll just get a whole bunch of calls about procuring costs out of nowhere. Suddenly everybody has a procuring costs issue. Lately it's been seller's disclosures. I get a lot of seller's disclosures. Another little weird hot topic is remedies for default under the rep seat. A lot of misconceptions out there. So I guess we can play Stump the Attorney if you want to. But let's talk about seller's disclosures and HOAs, and then we'll see if I leave any time. Because I'm an attorney, so I can just fill it all and say see. Okay, let's start with HOAs. I don't have slides for that, but let's talk about working with them. And we'll go into this a little bit also through seller's disclosures, because in the seller's disclosures, we're required to give information about HOAs, right? Let me tell you some of the problems that we've seen and encountered with agents working in HOAs. The first one is CC&Rs. Who knows what CC&Rs are? We've all heard it, and it's not Clearwater Revival. Right? It's Clearwater. See, I don't even know. It's not the guys who sing the Raisin Dancing song. No, they're covenants, conditions, and restrictions. They're also called declaration. Right? It's just some nods. They go with condos. You have to have them in a condominium. So if you're selling a condo, you know you're going to have CC&Rs, right? And they go with all kinds of things. units, right? It's not just condos. So the way we look at it, we say, okay, we have condominiums, we have non-condominiums. What's a non-condo? It's anything else that might have CCNRs. It's Daybreak, it's as the master and each little sub-association. One that we've seen a lot of problems with is Traverse Mountain, where, I probably said that wrong, did I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable? Traverse Mountain, whatever. That place with the outlet mall and Cabela's. There's a big master association, right? So people are going to have to pay dues there. They're going to have to do, and then you have little sub-associations that are within that. So you have two declarations, two sets of CCNRs that they've got to worry about when you're buying. If you're helping buyers, you should be asking those questions. You will see it on the title report. You better see it on the title report, right, Vanguard?
Yeah, that's what we're
You better see it on the title report. If you see that on the title report, your sellers are supposed to disclose. They're supposed to give you that information. If you haven't gotten that in the seller property condition disclosure, there's going to be the HOA representative's telephone number. Make sure your buyers get a copy of that. If you're on the seller side, make sure you have a copy to give out to the buyers. Right? And make sure you have all the copies. So again, we use two examples, Daybreak and Traverse. I'm going with it. I know it's the wrong syllable, but Traverse. You got these two that have multiple sets of CCNR. If I'm a buyer, that's no fun. I might want to be subject to all kinds of regulation. Make sure you get those, okay? That's a big problem. We get that all the time. I know that sometimes buyers will misunderstand what are in the CCNRs, what does it mean? What am I buying into? They'll have a vision in their mind that an HOA is a place where all landscaping maintenance is taken care of. They paint your house, they replace your roof. And in some cases, that's true. In a condo, it is true. And we can talk about condo ownership if you want in a second. But in the non-condo, it might not be true. For example, I live in an HOA. I swore I would never live in an HOA. Swore I would never live in an HOA. And here I live in an HOA. All they regulate is whether I build a detached garage, if I want to paint my house pink. It's very minimal. They have a little park strip and a little entrance, like sign theme, and we pay $100 a year to take care of that. Other than that, I have to mow my own lawn. I guess they could come and yell at me if I park my cars out on the street for too long. There's just some keep the neighborhood nice looking covenants, but other than that, it's pretty funny. I was skiing with the HOA president, and I said, just for fun, I'm not going to pay my HOA dues this year, and I just want to see if you guys turn me over to collections. And he kind of laughed, and he goes, well, you're the attorney, so I guess you have to own your own house, right? I mean, they just do very little. But then you have condos where they do a lot. Some HOAs are really, it's something the developers designed to be a full-service community so that you can go live there and not have to worry about anything. You see that a lot in adult, what do they call it? Active adult communities, right? Where they come live here, you stop in your yard, you do your barbecues, but we're going to take care of it. So, if you have clients who really want to be in an HOA, but they want a specific set of services, they need to really look at the CCNRs and understand and ask questions, especially during buyer's due diligence, right? So they can still cancel if it doesn't give them what they want. Some questions that you should ask. So associations, I think we're all familiar with the fact we charge dues, monthly dues. I just mentioned mine's $100 a year. It's annual, some do quarterly. Some questions you ought to ask are there any special assessments? So most HOAs have this authority to come in and just assess you almost whatever they want. And if you're working with a new buyer who's coming into an HOA, if there was a vote to approve the $19,000 per person assessment, they might not be part of that because they didn't buy before that, but they may be responsible for it. When I bought into my HOA, that was the first question. I found the number, I called the board president, and my first question was, are there any special assessments? Because I didn't want to move in and then get some whopper bill, right? And then I said, are there any issues that may lead to special assessments in the future? Okay? Because I didn't want to move in and then 6 months later, after having paid my whole life savings to the down payment, have to come up with a bunch of money. To give you an example, years ago I worked with one of the high-rise condos down at the mouth of Immigration Canyon. Their boiler went out. And then their pipes started to burst. It was an older building, galvanized pipes, they failed, right? They had to replace all of the plumbing on 14 floors of the building. They had to do new boilers, new chillers, and some other piece. It was a $2 million job. The cheapest assessment for the studio condo was $19,000. For the penthouse, which was 4,000 square foot penthouses, that was $140,000. That's a big chunk of change, right? Big chunk of change. So you want to know if that's coming down the pipe. Now, as far as getting information, so the seller should be giving you minutes. They should be giving you financial statements. If they haven't, ask for those. I'm trying to think, the case we just had where it came down to what it said in the minutes. Oh, I remember. There was a construction defect. Not a lawsuit, but they were talking about filing a lawsuit. And the buyer bought into this community and got mad because they didn't know that there was a potential construction defect going on. And it wasn't reflected in the minutes that were given to them, but they weren't given all the minutes they were supposed to get. For those of you who go minutes, that's the thing, that's the big hand on my watch. Minutes are records. They're the official record of a meeting. Okay, so it should get board. There's two types of minutes HOAs have: board meeting minutes and owner meeting minutes. Owner meetings are typically once a year, unless there's a special circumstance, for instance, like a special assessment or something. Then you'll have more than that. Board meetings are usually once a month. So if you're looking at, do I have a complete set of minutes? It's okay to ask, hey, if you don't see something that says owners meetings minutes or member meeting minutes, say, hey, is there a copy of that we can get? If they only give you one set of board meeting minutes, you can say, are there other months or others that I can get? Okay, so it should give you the minutes. Financial statements, they're only required to give you the general. When I say they, I mean the seller. Okay, the seller's only required to give you the general financial statement. So that would be like an income statement, a balance sheet, maybe a budget. So just really broad information about the finances. Yes.
On the minutes, I mean, how much are you really looking for? I mean, from the beginning of time, last year?
I think the last few months is probably enough to really give you a sense of what's happening. A lot of buyers don't do anything with this stuff. Probably experienced that. They're like, okay, what's this? That's a big, fat, ugly legal document called CC&Rs. They go, haha, I have better things to do, and I love the two-tone pink, so I don't care. But you will, right? You will, and you will care. You know, if you saw something in the meeting minutes, when I look at them, I'm just looking for just red flags. Like, is there something litigation? Is something going on? Those types. So a few months is enough. Yeah.
The other thing was about on the CC&Rs. Sometimes you'll have a client who will say they want to move into a community that they take care of the entire yard. Well, the CC&Rs may say that they take care of the yard at a time. However, next year they vote and they change the decision, so it's no longer that type of a community. So key thing is you just got to make sure that your client is aware that that can change.
Absolutely.
As of right now, that's what is being stated, but it can change.
It can change. Absolutely. Now, HOAs, they're organized as corporations, okay? They're typically a nonprofit corporation. Sometimes they're LLCs. That was a bad choice by some people who didn't know about it. Typically, they're nonprofit corporations, right? Nonprofit corporations have to provide certain documents to their members. In a nonprofit, in a for-profit corporation, we have shareholders, right? We talk about shareholders or stockholders, right? In a nonprofit, we talk about members. Same thing. Members are people who have the right to vote, they have the right to do certain things. A nonprofit only has to give its corporate records to its members. So I've drawn this. So here's how it would go. The HOA is legally required to give owners, sellers, the documentation you might be looking for, and definitely the documentation required under the seller's disclosures. The seller then has a contract with the buyer. There is no connection between the buyer and the HOA before they actually buy. So I've heard people say, hey, I'm really upset because I'm representing the buyer and the HOA won't talk to me. Well, now you're once removed from somebody they don't necessarily care about because they're not a member of the corporation. You've got to work through the seller to get the information. Now, if you're the seller, when we look at the paragraph on seller's disclosures, you should just gather this stuff. Go to your seller and say, hey, I'm going to need all of this stuff from the HOA. Let's just get it together. And then every time there's a board meeting or whatever, let's update that packet so that I can just give it to the buyer. We don't have any issues. Does that make sense? Now, the seller, if the HOA isn't very forthcoming, if they're not cooperative, the seller may have to make an official demand. The HOA has like 15 days to provide that. Be aware of that. If you're really interested in seeing what the HOA has to say, you may want to adjust seller disclosures deadlines or due diligence deadlines to account for the fact that HOAs don't have to give information for 15 days after request.
What's an official demand? Is it a letter
So you
from
have to
them?
write a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be
It doesn't have to
in
be
writing. It has
attorney.
to say I'm going to come at a certain time to gather the records. It does not have to be from an attorney.
Okay.
Yes.
You may cover this, but sometimes we're seeing now that HOAs are charging to release this. So that, again, not the buyer, goes back to where it's going to come to the seller's issue.
Yep, so they can charge the seller, they can charge them a reasonable fee. When I've had HOAs call me and say, what's a reasonable fee? I usually go, well, what does Kinko's charge to make copies of that? The same, 10 cents a page. I do know of HOAs, there's a very large community in St. George that was trying to charge like $100 a page. Whoa. Just grumpy old people down there, I guess, I don't know. Crazy. But it has to be a reasonable fee, but they can charge. Another, while we're on the topic of money, you have things called reinvestment fees. People call them transfer fees. There's a statute a few years ago that changed the official name from transfer fee to reinvestment fee. What that is, it's a fee that an HOA can charge anytime a property transfers. Okay? And if the property, in order to charge that fee, they have to have a notice on the record, on the county, on the title records for that property. That's a notice you should see in your title reports. Typically, they're called notice of reinvestment fee. They can charge up to 0.5% of the sale price. Anything over that is illegal. Okay? That's something to consider as you're taking people to HOAs to see how much do they have one and how much is it. Because another 0.5% on your closing disclosure may scare people off, right? Those typically don't show up until the very end. So it's a good question to ask early on. Do you have a reinvestment fee and how much? Yes.
Yeah, as a lender, it's really crucial for us to know that up front. I mean, a lot of times we have to do our due diligence and find out what that is. But if you as a listing agent have that information, it'll make our life a lot easier because we'll be able to contact this agent. Or we have to go to the HOA, and I'll call them a lot, and a lot of times they say you have to go online and get that information online.
They make you go to like condo certs or whatever.
Yeah, and a lot of times it'll cost $150, $200 just to do that. So as listing agents, if you guys can get that information,
That's really good. Excellent. Anything over 0.5% though, I mean, if you're looking at, well, that's really high, and it's more than 0.5%, there's a problem. There are, of course, exceptions. Every 2% is the exception, but the rule of thumb is 0.5%. Another question. Oh, another thing to find out is exactly how much that monthly fee is. I know the lender well, I know the escrow people well, but it's a good thing for you to know as well. I see all the time. So you look on the MLS data sheet or the MLS listing, it says HOA fee, right? I see weird numbers in there all the time that actually have no relation whatsoever to reality. On the listing side, I think Rob will sleep better if you actually get a good number and stick it in there. Yeah. I will sleep better because then Rob will call me in the middle of the night when he's up worrying about your HOA fees that you misrepresented.
I just showed one that had $1 for each.
$1!
And then I actually checked the history of the MLS, and it was actually $2.25. For a
To
month.
be slapped in the face.
So,
Those HOA fees can
no, it's still not fair.
they can reduce the borrowing power of your buyer, right? Rule of thumb I heard was every $100 is equal to 10,000 of borrowing. Is that about
It
close?
depends on a lot of different factors.
Sure.
And it's important, it's really, really important to know what these fees are.
So if you see $1, that's probably wrong. I wouldn't say that's deemed reliable, but not guaranteed.
Yeah, huge red flag for me.
Nobody charges $1. I think mine's pretty cheap at 100 a year. Yeah.
I call the HOA fee every single time.
Absolutely, you should, 100%.
You
I-
call the HOA, you said, yeah, and I just
What?
verify every single bit of information because I
Oh.
never think that the agent's got it right.
So
I never
what Amy said is she calls an HOA fee every single time she has a buyer interested in the community, because she doesn't deem that to be reliable, even though it says so in the
I ask for
bylaws.
transfer fees, about rental,
Absolutely, so you have reinvestment fees, the regular HOA fees, special fees.
I add one other thing, I apologize guys, but on the lender side, it's really important for us to know, especially you as listing agents, is it really is it a townhome, is it a PUD, or is it a condo? And it's huge, because a lot of times on MLS sheets, we'll have the sheet that will say townhome. And what I do is I always do my due diligence, I need to find out if it's a condo or townhome. And the reason being, primarily, is the price. The interest rate on a condo is going to be higher than a townhome. And most of the time, you'll be surprised when it's listed as a townhome, it's actually a condo.
Well,
You just need to go to the legal description to find that out.
Do you know,
it looks like a townhome.
It looks like a
But
townhome.
they took
I
title
call
as a condo.
townhomes the tomato of the real estate world, right? Is it a fruit? Is it a vegetable? It could be either, could be neither. We don't know, but it's really good on pizza as sauce, right? It's a good sauce base. The other thing with condos, so townhomes can be either a condo or a non-condo. I talked about condos. I talked about non-condos. I lump PUDs into all non-condo categories, just in my mind, right? But townhome is an architectural style. It's a product type. You can have condos that are in a townhome style. You can have PUDs. What's the difference here? In a condo, you own airspace. If we remember from real estate, if they still teach it.
Yeah,
Well,
like inside paint, inside paint.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, that's about it, right? Inside paint to inside paint, meaning that the roof over my condo, my townhome condo, is actually owned by all of my neighbors and me, right? We all own it together. In condos, there are certain insurance requirements, homeowners insurance, right? The condo, you don't need to buy a full policy for the building. You need to buy what's equivalent. They call it an HO6 policy. It's equivalent to a renter's policy, right? It's going to cover your contents. And there's some riders that you could buy that would cover things like the deductible on the HOA's property insurance. So some HOAs have 10,000. I saw one 50,000. There's one with like $1 million deductible, right? So you can buy these things. In a PUD, you've got to buy homeowners insurance because you own the building, you own the ground. Okay? In a PUD, even though you own the building, own the ground, own the stuff, it's possible the HOA maintains it because of the CC&Rs, which are a contract saying, even though you own it, we'll take care of it. In exchange for that, you're going to pay us this fee of $1. It's great, except for it's really $2 whatever. Okay. And then, any other questions? Thoughts, questions, concerns, things you're running into?
I'm with the lender as well, Citywide.
Oh, awesome.
The
Welcome. I love the lender's comments because
condo requires the cert, and that's
Yep.
what, so often people don't check to see if it really is a warrantable condo. I put in there that it's available for FHA financing, and that's going to kill it for a lot of deals.
I love it. FHA financing on this.
Don't put it's FHA or it's available for FHA financing or other financing conventionally unless you know for sure and check with your lender.
Exactly.
Because there's a pretty nice checklist of things we need to go through.
A big checklist. I used to have to write an opinion, FHA opinion letter. For those of you who don't know, in a condo, the FHA, they have the individual requirements, right? You've got a qualified person, your buyer, go through that whole process. But they also have to qualify the project in a condo. which means they're looking at things like how many HOA fees are delinquent. You know, they look at all
How many
kinds of
renters
stuff.
are in the
How many
property.
renters? We have too many renters versus not enough. They even look at what the CCNRs say, see if there's anything they don't like.
And when it expires.
And when it expires, it does expire. Is that where you're raising your hand?
I
There's a
wouldn't say
database that shows you.
The FHA, I think this is such a good lesson for us, because when we're listing, we need to do it right. I had an FHA condo, and I find out it's not FHA, of course, we're checking right up the front. I called the agent, he goes, well, my seller will take an FHA loan. I'm like, well, that's fine and dandy, but this property.
My seller doesn't care where the money comes from, just that it's there, right?
We had such a
Bravo.
fight, and it delayed our closing, and then they didn't want to delay, and so it's nuts. And I think that expiration is so key, because you can be in the middle of a deal and it expires.
You gotta close.
And
That's
if
true,
they
you
don't
have to
get on it
close before it
and get it
expires.
renewed, you're gone.
I've had HOAs, condo HOAs call me saying, there's a buyer, they want to sue the HOA because the they're not qualified for FHA. That's not something your buyers can sue an HOA for, right? That's up to the HOA. Some of them can't get it because it would require an amendment to the CCNR, which requires a vote of so many owners, which they just don't have enough owners who care enough to show up and vote. So make sure you're aware of that. Thank you for bringing that up. Good point. Yes.
No, we don't want to bring up specifics in this discussion.
Fire away. Let's.
I had some clients that were looking out in Daybreak, and I know that there is a lawsuit going on with between the HOA and some of the builders.
Yep.
In trying to find information from, first of all, Daybreak wouldn't release any information, and the seller said, there's nothing wrong with my house is not part of this. Well,
But did they live in one of the HOAs that? So at Daybreak,
There are so
for those
many
of you who
HOAs.
haven't seen the KSL stories, 3 HOAs, 3 builders. The HOAs have all sued these builders, some of the owners inside the HOA, right? So if you're in the HOA, but your house isn't affected,
well,
you're kind of stuck with what your neighbors are doing.
well, when the seller said, we are not involved in that, we can do whatever we want to with our house. How do we know that? And
Do you know that? It's a great question. If the HOA is named as a plaintiff, all the owners are involved in it, whether it affects their house or not, right? Because an HOA is a corporation and all the owners are the members of that corporation. So you're all tied to that somehow. Does that make
it's not
sense?
built by that builder, that's why he was saying that.
Sure. No, and I get that. So from time to time, builders will go out of business. I know that sounds weird. Builders just make money and are always in business. But they'll go out of business and then sell the rest of the subdivision to another builder. Maybe that first builder was the bad builder, right? But if the HOA is named as a party in the lawsuit, regardless of who built which house or which house is suffering the cracked siding or paint peeling or whatever's going on, yeah, the foundation, selling, everybody's tied to that through their membership in the HOA.
Then how do you advise your client on something like that?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
You don't buy there?
So wait, are there 3 separate HOAs or just 3 separate?
There's 3 separate HOAs within the Daybreak community.
So you have to make sure it was the.
The interesting thing about that is the story just came up. The lawsuit's been going for over 2 years now. And I think the story came up because it's not going very good for the HOAs. In fact, they're getting
Say that
walked
again.
in court. So the HOAs who sued Daybreak, the story just barely hit the news feeds, right? In the last, 6 weeks?
News got slow, so
Those-
decided to post something.
Those lawsuits have been going for over 2 years. I look at it, I've looked into them. It's not going well for the HOA. Construction defect is a really difficult thing as an owner. It's not going very well for the HOA, so I think they've gone to the court of public opinion to try to see if they can get something going there. Because it's not looking good in the courts. But how do you advise your client, right? Well, yeah, I would say, look, you've got to understand that if the HOA is a party to a lawsuit, if they need extra money to help fund that lawsuit, they have the ability to specially assess. If you're a member, then you get specially assessed, right? So you just need to be aware that
you just wanna be at that
You're
meeting
part of
when they,
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
make
have
sure
that
you
vote.
go to the meetings, make sure you understand, make sure you're voting, right?
So yeah,
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 that's
that's one
it.
of my questions, so every special assessment requires a vote, right? From the members?
Sometimes,
But they don't have to.
part of the CCNRs, they don't.
Yeah. Depends on what the CCNR is.
so look for Sam Bell
You have to
somewhere
guess
on
it.
the CCNR.
I can tell you what mine look like, they're in plain language, so
Yeah.
if they seem too thin and too straightforward, then they're probably mine, watch out.
Coach World speaking of.
Just as a side, I do that because so few others care, but the board really understands what's going on, so I want to make sure they have the power to get the job done. Just say, be aware, make sure you're going to meetings, make sure you're staying informed. If you want to buy in a place that's in the middle of a construction defect housing. Now there are some lenders who won't lend. That condo cert, when he talked about a condo, one of these two guys talked about a condo cert, I can't remember which one. That's, the lender wants basically a questionnaire of information filled out. Most of them, one of the questions is the HOA engaged in litigation? Pending litigation, if they check yes, the lender may not even land on that question.
It'll depend on so many different factors, but most of the time, I would say the majority of times, you can. But there are situations
think about it.
just
Yeah.
In the middle of a litigation with an HOA, are all of the owners in that HOA supposed to be aware of what's going on?
Are they?
Should they be? Can they be?
They should be notified, but if they don't read the newsletter, if they don't pay attention to the emails or whatever,
Go to the meetings.
they don't go to the meetings then.
So what if they go to the meetings and they ask about it and they say, I'm sorry, we're in the middle of litigation, you can't know anything about
Okay,
that?
so there are certain things that owners cannot know because of attorney-client privilege, right? So privilege is this really special, important thing. It allows clients to freely communicate everything they know about a case with their attorney, but nobody can pry that out of that relationship. So you can't put them on the stand and go, what did your attorney tell you? That's a big no-no, right?
Legal capital.
The only reason I ask is when sellers try and fill out disclosures, they don't know how to fill them out.
Yeah. So if your seller feels like they need to disclose that there's litigation, that's about all they can put is litigation, right? Now let's say you're working with a buyer and they get one of those and go, I'm really concerned. At that point say, hey, maybe you should contact an attorney. You can look up, the documents filed are typically public records. We can look. So when I say I kind of like kept an eye on these Daybreak things, just log into the court's website, and I look at what's been filed, just to get a sense for what motions have been filed, where things are. That's why I know they've been going for over 2 years and stuff like that. Because you keep seeing that the contractors are winning motions, right? So you can have someone kind of look at it and give them an opinion, right? Yes.
I had an interesting situation last year, and I guess I'm just double checking to make sure that I did the right thing. So I sold a home. It was actually in Harriman, and it had an HOA on the CCNRs, but there was no HOA fee because more or less the one guy that was trying to get the committee going got threatened by all his neighbors that they would probably do that. If he started one, so there was no fee, but it was written in the CCNRs that at some point they would develop an HOA. So, but there was no fee going because none of the owners within that HOA wanted to start a board.
Sure.
So but I still had to disclose that.
Yes.
Some manner.
For a while, I know Richmond American really decided, hey, we don't like these HOAs there. And we're developing PUDs that are standalone single-family houses. So there's no attached anything. Instead of doing an HOA, we'll just do covenants. Okay? So no pink doors, no boats parked in the driveway for 3 months. You know, everybody has to have an asphalt shingle, those types of things. They didn't actually create an HOA. They said, if you don't like what your neighbor's doing, here's the CCNRs, you sue them. Makes for a very congenial neighborhood. Everybody sues each other because they don't like it. And that's something where I've seen those advertised as no HOA, right? Big bold point, no HOA, but they still have restrictive covenants. They still have CCNRs. They just haven't organized a corporation to run and manage those CCNRs.
And that would sum up on the title?
The CCNRs would.
Can a CCNR be changed?
It can be changed, and it typically requires a vote of all the owners to change.
Because there's a subdivision that's up in Harriman that's kind of in the midst of a lot of other ones, but right in that subdivision, they say no boats, no things like that. But you can have the RV parking, but you can't park the RV in the RV parking. And this is just in this one section. So our buyers have asked us, so we can't put our trailer along the side on the RV parking that you poured for this house. Sorry, that's in the CCNRs. Can it be changed?
It can be changed.
So how do they go about doing that?
In the CCNRs, we will have a provision that says amendment. And they just follow that. A lot of them require 67% of all the owners to change.
So how long does a CCNR last in a subdivision of really old homes? Can somebody else come in there and say, okay, we're not going to have any businesses in this? I'm talking about Bloomington. No businesses in this subdivision, and yet they've got the Walmart, the hotels, the gas stations, and now a utility company that's moved in there. Yeah, and see, nobody's allowed to put a rental in the back of their house because it's all acres.
Sure.
So how do you change something like that?
That would be
The city fathers are the ones that come in there and say, oh yeah, but we're going to change that and do what we want, but the people that live here can't do that.
Yes, so it would be amendment to change, right? They don't expire. They don't expire. You'd have to have all the owners come together to vote to terminate the HOA. How the HOA is doing that? It's really tough.
By the same token, would you have to have somebody make a complaint that you actually have an RV in there?
Yeah, no, that's true, right? How did they get policed? You have, if there's an HOA, right? We talked about the covenants with no HOA. Let's go with, there's an HOA, then there's a board. The board, one of the board's duties is to police and enforce the CCNRs, okay? Most boards don't drive around trying to punish their neighbors, right? So a lot of them are very responsive. It's a little like the division of real estate. If you don't like what an agent's doing, you have to make a complaint. You have to file something, and they'll investigate and do it. They're not really out there actively policing. They're just responding to complaints. It's pretty similar to an HOA. So somebody parks their RV. Somebody may complain. They may not. I know lots of HOAs where they're like, we all have those. Okay. I live in one of those.
I've heard that if there's open notorious ignoring of the CCNRs, that will make them null and void.
Yes, so they can be abandoned, as the term. It takes time, but there have to be so many violations that the average person driving through would go, there's no covenant. So there's a covenant saying no pink doors. You've got 100 homes, 58 homes paint their door pink. Nothing's going on. There's no enforcement, no letters, no lawsuits to make them change the doors back. Your buyer drives through and sees that all the doors are pink, goes, I love pink door communities, buys the house with the black door, paints it pink. They could say, hey, that covenant against pink doors was abandoned because of lack of enforcement.
And aren't they primarily from about the 70s forward? Virtually all cities require them now for any new subdivision.
It's true.
Prior to the 70s, most homes don't have CCNRs.
So it really started with condos, right? Because you have to have them in a condo because of the way it's organized. And the original Condo Act, I think, was 76. So right about there is when you start seeing these CCNRs being played. Any other questions on HOAs? We all love some
I know this is stupid, but I had a client last year who was trying to get into a condo in Beaver County, and they refused to allow her to purchase that, the board refused to allow her to purchase that condo because her dog was too fat.
No fat dogs!
It was true, and she said to me, I can't tell me that my dog is too fat. I said, I think they can. Now, can they?
Sure.
If there's
Sure, that's why we let me drink. They can, right? Because some HOAs have that pet weight limit. And I've seen people come in with full-grown German Shepherds and say, no, they're less than 20 pounds. It's really fluffy, right? No. It's not less than 20 pounds.
They just don't feed their dog.
There are breed restrictions, right? There are some exceptions under fair housing, disability. You can have companion animals, service
Well,
animals.
this
right?
was a small dog, but it was
Sure.
just a fat dog.
There's probably a pet weight limit, but yeah, they can. There are certain HOAs that say no sex offenders, right? Well, if your client's a sex offender, why? If they buy that house, they're gonna have to just turn around and sell it again. It makes no sense. So, what's interesting is in places like New York and some of the big towns, they have what are called co-ops, which are a lot like condos, right? They're a lot like condos. And we used to have co-ops in Utah. They've since eliminated that from the statute and just said if you want one, just build a condo. The co-ops, you have to be interviewed by the board before they let you buy. Can you imagine that? Okay, we made an offer. Now we just gotta go to the interview. See if they like us.
Question, what if you know, where it says you can't have a sex offender living in that condo, but you have a buyer and you have no idea that they're a sex offender? And they buy it, when is anybody gonna find out that they're a sex offender? When somebody chooses to read the CC&Rs and he says he wants a sex offender, but he never tells anybody?
So what's interesting is there's a registration requirement for sex offenders.
Right.
There's a website, Sonar. Sonar. I can't remember, but it's run by the Department of Corrections, the Utah State Department of Corrections. I'm on Sonar, and I get pinged anytime a sex offender moves into a 2-mile radius of my house. And I get an email. In fact, I got one yesterday. It shows up on my phone. They're registered. So people, if they hear that you might be on that, can look you up. It's free, it's easy. You just run their name, it shows you their picture, it tells you their crimes, it tells you their address. One of the most awkward moments in my career, I was sitting in an HOA board meeting, and they were saying, we want to keep sex offenders out. And the board president just started asking questions. Well, why? Well, why sex offenders? Well, what if they're burglars, right? Well, felons. All of a sudden, the lady next to him looks and goes, what, are you a sex offender? And that got really quiet. It's super awkward, right? And he was. And then he resigned. He's like, I resigned. And then sold it. But you should be aware of this. I mean, I don't think you have to say, hey, are you a sex offender? But if when you give them the
Highlight it.
buyer, in addendum 1, buyer is a sex offender. No, don't do that. But when you get the CC&Rs, I mean, that's something your client should be looking for. Do I have a dog that's too big? My wife loves our dog. I bought the dog because my kids and wife love it. It's their dog, right? If it poops on a neighbor's lawn, they say, your dog pooped on my lawn. I say, it's not my dog. I tolerate it. I'm nice to it, right? But it's their dog, right? When we bought this, when we got this house under contract in the HOA we're in right now, I pulled up the CC&Rs and then I called her and I said, oh, no pets, so we're going to have to get rid of the dog before. She didn't like that. I was lying. No pets. Hoping maybe I would have to shovel poop anymore. That's one thing they should be looking at. Are there certain pieces of my lifestyle that are going to be a problem in this community, right? So as they're looking through those CC&Rs, they see no sex offenders, they're going to know if they're a sex offender, and then it's a simple call to you to say, maybe not that one, let's keep it, right? Or if they have a 100-pound dog and it's a 20-pound weight limit, they can go, maybe this isn't the place for us. Right? Okay. Holy cow. 50 minutes of HOA. Any other questions? Yes.
I have one, and I'm sure I should know this answer, but I've not come across this, kind of not fresh on it. When we're writing an offer, in every offer is a question about or something like that, where it says special assessments, and you click seller is going to be in charge of special assessments. And I've not, I guess, come across anything where there were any special assessments that were there. So if my buyer is buying a condo and we check on their special assessments will be paid by the seller, which special assessments are we talking about? Are we talking about special assessments that were assessed 2 years ago, but the payments go on for 8 years and the seller is in charge of the last 6 years? This is my question here.
That's a good question. So special assessments can be structured in a lot of different ways, right? I mentioned that condo where it was $19,000 for the studio, $144,000 for the penthouse. Those were all due when they said they were due, like that day. One payment, boom, you're done. Okay. There are lots of HOAs that realize, hey, our ownership can't bear that kind of burden. Nobody here has $100,000, so cash right now. So let's do this in installments over several years. Okay. Here's how I would deal with that. I would check sellers in charge of special assessments, and then in an addendum, I would say this includes all past or future. So here's what you have. You have the special assessment. There's going to be in the timeline, there's going to be a moment, right, when they assess that.
Correct.
So that's the day I did. I'd say any special assessment that was approved prior to buyer taking ownership, right, will be paid by seller, even though there might be payments after buyer takes. Does that make sense? So that's how I do that. It's interesting. A lot of HOAs do this. A lot of HOAs will do something, and then it almost just becomes part of the regular assessment, but a piece of it's the special assessment. So if you identify a special assessment that was approved prior to the closing, be paid by seller until payment forward.
Okay, so let's say that we don't create that addendum. And the buyer buys the property and we've already declared what the HOA fee is. Let's say it's $200 a month. That $200 a month included a special assessment that was created 2 years ago that continues for 3 more years. And we click on there, seller will pay special assessments. A year later, the buyer looks at this and says, well, wait a minute, that extra $50 was a special assessment. I'm not supposed to be paying that extra $50 per month. The seller was supposed to be paying that. Can the buyer then turn around and sue you as the realtor or the seller? I mean, I need to be very aware of this. I want to know at what point my liability lies.
Sure. Can they? They can try, right? So you can sue anybody for anything at any time. The question I have is, can we win? Right? I've just kind of come to that conclusion. You got sued, so what? The question is, as an agent, you should be asking questions of the other side about special assessments, right?
Yes.
And we talked about this earlier. Are there special assessments? Now, some of these owners, they've been doing it so long and regularly, they forget. So I would say probably yes to the seller. Because if they said no, there's no special assessment. 2 years later, our buyer figures out there actually is a special assessment. I've been paying an extra $50 a month for the last 2 years. The answer is yes. Now, when we get to we're not going to get to it very much. In the seller's disclosure, there's some exceptions. One is fraud. And what is fraud? I told you something that's not true. That's right. So you have fraudulent non-disclosure. What's fraudulent non-disclosure? I asked you, it's material, meaning it has a bearing on whether I buy this property or how much I pay for this property, and you didn't tell me. So you asked. So we could fast forward real quick to stigmatized property. What is that? Stigmatized property is something where murder, suicide, meth, or HIV. Okay, those are your stigmatized properties. Do you have to disclose stigmatized property?
Yeah.
The answer is no. The answer is if they ask. Right? If they don't ask, you don't have to tell. The same goes for this special assessment. If you ask, they have to tell. Do you have any special assessments? If they tell you something wrong, then you can sue them later on for fraudulent non-disclosure.
You can sue the seller,
The seller, not the agent.
not the agent,
The agent knew
what they were told.
and knew that the buyer was lying, then they have a duty to tell.
So if somebody commits suicide in the home and then somebody from out of
Get
state,
graphics on this.
everybody knows, because this just happened to a friend of mine, so, It's like somebody commits suicide in that home and everybody knows that some out-of-state buyer comes in and just kind of buys the house, finds out from all the neighbors that that had just happened before they bought the house. They're just, you know, they didn't
So if you have a
ask.
client that goes, I don't want to live anywhere someone died, I don't want to live anywhere someone committed suicide, I don't want, that's still bad. I don't want to live anywhere where there's a felony, I don't, and these are questions you need to be asking on their behalf.
Did you cover that?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, meth, sorry.
Meth? Yep, decontaminated meth house. Here's my little thing. Nice New England home, great location. Does anybody recognize that house? Hey, Lizzie Borden had an axe. She gave her mother 40 whacks when she saw what she had done. She gave her father 41. That's the Lizzie Borden house, right? Famous murder. So famous we have a poem. Ah, it's great, right? But she doesn't have to disclose that. You don't have to know that that was the Lizzie Borden murder house. But if you ask, they have to tell you. Ask, yeah. It's part about knowing what your buyers want. What are their concerns? You know, there's some funny disclosure laws, like in New York, you have to disclose if it's haunted. Okay?
Every house is haunted.
Every house is haunted, right? If you have a client, it's entirely possible that throughout your career, you're going to run into somebody who goes, I'm really nervous about ghosts. And you're going to have to keep a straight face, okay? And go, I better ask. The duty is, if you ask a seller something, and they go, well, actually, on the third Wednesday of every month, I get this weird glowing coming from, you know, I've called the Ghostbusters 4 times. They've been out. Slimer lives in my basement.
There are ghost inspectors.
There are ghosts. There's a lot of ghost inspectors.
There's a ghost tour, Mark. See, it's fun.
There's a ghost tour.
You can hire a ghost inspector.
I don't know if I've been on ghost tours. They're really kind of interesting. So, but if you have a client that's nervous about buying the Borden's old house, make sure you ask murder, suicide, felony, meth, HIV, ghosts.
Okay, wait, on that, so you said HIV or any other, what was it?
I just really wanted to show you the pictures.
I know.
Any other infectious disease that's transferable by living in the same home?
That is transferable or is not?
That
So
is
it's-
not, or,
It says that it is not
sorry,
transferable.
that's a typo. I didn't write this letter for the record.
But they wouldn't have to tell you unless you asked? Okay, I keep saying that.
Well, a cold is transferable.
Has anybody ever had a cold in this house? You may get people like that. You may get
Oh.
We're working with What About Bob guy, Bob Wiley.
But when people rent property, that's interesting, because the landlord couldn't ask those questions, right?
The landlord can't
I mean,
ask of the
about
tenant, but a
diseases.
tenant could ask of the landlord.
Yeah, so, okay, so that's interesting. So like if you're renting your house and somebody wanted to know if someone with an infectious disease had been there, but if you didn't ever ask your tenants, you would never know, right?
As a landlord, you gotta be careful. On fair housing, you can't discriminate based on disability,
Right.
right? That's anything that impairs life's major functions, right? So that could be a cold, that could be anything really. So as a landlord, you can't go, well, I'm not gonna rent to you if you have HIV or AIDS or any of that stuff. You can't ask that, but the tenant can. Do you know of anyone who was here?
But
Tenants
if
don't.
they're renting from you and they end up with HIV when they're renting from you, you still can't ask your tenant, do you have HIV? So that would
That'd be a really weird conversation. Hey, how's it going? Place like your place got HIV. Well, if you're renting to Magic Johnson, and one day he pops up on television, goes, "I've got HIV. I made some, interesting life choices when I was young." Then you know, wait, he's in my
But you
rental.
can't get HIV sitting on the toilet anyway.
Yeah. So that
Well,
makes
that's
the
why
question,
it's
how
saying
does the law?
stigmatized. It's not really.
They have to help
Yeah.
people, educate people, and things like that.
Right.
Right.
Will you go in a little more, I get this question all the time for, so they do the home inspection. The home inspector who's not the state certified meth decontamination specialist. Does the inspection and it comes up and it's 1.5. So it is above the legal limit.
Okay.
What is the obligation on disclosure?
Boy, if it's over the limit, that has to be reported to the health department. And then it goes onto a public website, right? It's a bigger problem
I
than
think
just
he's
telling.
talking about just those boxes that they pick up, like, you know, right,
Well,
like not a
so I-
certified person just grabbing a.
How about I'll tell you?
Oh, I go to the Home Depot, I buy a little
Yeah.
kit, it comes back.
Yeah, so the home inspector's been doing the test. Now, they are not certified by the state, so it isn't verified.
Yeah.
I've also called the state whether or not we have the obligation as the agent to disclose that. But I'd love your take on that one. Because it is not, what I've advised the seller is basically disclose, because we don't know for a fact if it truly is above the legal limit, but you have knowledge that
You have
there might be
information.
something, you have information, and if you choose not to do anything with the information, and it did have above the legal limit, you are gonna be in
Fraudulent
trouble.
non-disclosure, right? It doesn't go away. As an agent, you don't have a lot of duties to disclose. In fact, you have a very strong duty of confidentiality, but there are certain times when you do have a duty to disclose, and I would say if you know that the meth is above the limit, and your client's not telling, then you're gonna have to tell too. So yes, if they got one of those do-it-yourself kits and it comes back high, my recommendation to them is go get a state certified inspector. Let's get a real test done. Make sure. Because
And
then if it is, you got to be ready.
I don't want to do that.
to-
It's stigmatized, it's going to affect it.
You've got
But
to.
you've got one of two choices.
You've got to disclose, or
get rid of
don't.
the list.
If you don't disclose, your liability is going to extend far beyond closing.
So what are the dangers? This is a whole different situation. But like, what are the dangers, you know, of living in a house that have greater than one?
People get sick. I've talked to people like they got really violently headaches and it has to do with
It's
that's
like
the-
mold in a house.
Yeah. It can just create health issues.
Your leg starts twitching up and down.
Suddenly you own a glass pipe and you're looking for a dealer. It's really crazy. With the shakes when you don't.
Random people knocking on your door asking for meth all the time.
That's right. You buy an RV, you go out in the desert.
Quick question. So I got a client who he just purchased a house, the meth came back at 0.5. So he's doing a flip, remodeling, and selling. Does he have to disclose that?
0.5 is
house that
less
has
than
had a
one,
string of
so
really-
no, it's not at a level where I need something to disclose.
And if they ask,
If they ask, you have to tell them 0.5.
Oh, thanks, Travis.
Sweets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
they-
said you don't have to disclose if it's not under
So
the.
if it's less than this,
We kind of lack
it's not contaminated, right? The state says it's contaminated there. But if they say any meth at all, you got to ask. So again, put that into your quiver of questions when you're representing a buyer and you're wondering about a house. Any meth test done on this house? I have to answer yes or no. Answer yes. What was the level? Right now they have to say. Okay.
I spent hours researching this because we did come across a house that was higher. The 1.0 is per 100 square feet, they always, per 100 square centimeters, they always do 4 spots. So it's over 4.0, and it depends on which county you live in, whether it's, the 1.0 for 100 or 4.0 for 400, because one spot might be 1.2, one spot might be 0.05, etc. But what the state finally told me, I actually somehow got to the actual guy who makes the rules and everything, he said, and this may not matter to you guys, but it mattered to my buyer because we had a situation. He said, what we're really looking for, the problem with meth is whether or not it was cooked in the house. Because what causes the problems in our health and whatnot is the ingredients used to cook the meth. Not the actual smoking of the meth, but it's the ingredients that are dangerous that are used to prepare meth. He says, we have never found a house. The lowest we could ever find was 10.0 in a house. And they were like a pristine lab preparation meth house. Normally, if some idiot just starts cooking meth, you are gonna have a fairly high amount of meth in that house. And so the point being is that how high is it? Was it ever actually cooked in there? So they were basically saying, if it's not over 10.0, nobody was cooking meth in that house. We have never found something less than 10.0, and that was in a pristine white coat lab meth prep house. Yeah.
Thank you, great information. It's scary. By the way, meth houses, they're not just in West Valley and like burnout duplexes, right? It's real popular to buy to make nice houses. Grandma's house. Yes.
Is it true that if a buyer buys a house and the previous sellers disclosed, yes, it was a meth house, but trying to sell it, we went through the whole procedure to clean it up and decontaminate all that. The new buyer, when they go to sell, I think does not have to disclose because it went through its proper channels.
Yeah, so
Do you know, or has it ever been, and they can put no, because it went through the proper procedures to get
see if it hasn't ever been,
You would have to disclose.
you don't have to disclose because decontaminated is stigmatized property, which does not have to be disclosed unless you're asked.
Has it ever had that, you would have to disclose, it did, but we got it cleaned up, here's the certificate, you indicate it.
That's not required unless they ask.
That's correct.
Seller's disclosures don't ask it that way. Okay, they don't ask it.
Right, yes, on the seller's disclosures, if it has been cleaned, it just, you would check, does it have that? If it's been cleaned up? No, it does not.
No, okay.
That was go through the chart.
But if they ask personally, does it ever?
Ever.
Now
Now, they ask, does it have that? No.
That's why I just thought it should be.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. All right,
I smoked
thank you.
outside.
I'd love to stick around, but I have to go on. There we go. Everybody.
Sherry, I'll see you
Probably.
Friday.
Got some.